I offer these every week along with a guided meditation. Just click the subscribe link below to be notified through YouTube when I post the latest recording. Or if you'd like to join us live, which would be great, just go into the description section below and follow the link along to be able to sign up for free. Just a word on meditation. There are many kinds of meditating. Um, one of the things that's been personally very valuable for me has two aspects to it. First, it's to rest your mind on what draws your heart. And it's perfectly appropriate to use meditation as a kind of training of attention, perfectly fine. I find what's, for me, sort of a 2-for-1, is to use meditation to strengthen steadiness of mind, training attention, while also resting our attention on what draws our heart, what seems valuable to us. In particular, for me at least, what we are attempting to live increasingly into and be lived increasingly by, increasingly stabilized or established in us, as us, through us. So then you get a 2-for-1 there, right? You're resting your attention and you're stabilizing attention, while also through positive neuroplasticity, you are gradually changing your brain and your body so that you are more and more established in whatever you're resting your attention on. You are growing it as a trait. So it's helpful to consider, all right, what am I helping myself settle into if I'm doing formal or even informal practice in everyday life? What am I helping myself settle into? And then as you help yourself settle into it, you can increasingly receive it into yourself. You can let it spread inside you, and you can appreciate it and value it and enjoy it, all of which will tend to increase its consolidation in the neural nets of emotional and somatic memory as the residues of these beneficial experiences really sink into you. So these are two aspects of meditation that I find really helpful: being clear about what you're resting your attention on, and then receiving it into yourself. And often what we can rest our attention on and receive into ourselves is a blend, is a combination, which is very interesting to explore, like the combination of calm strength, or the combination of stable presence and a natural, inside-out, innate goodness, kindness, lovingness, the combination of those two. So that's a couple of suggestions here for you to consider. And now what I'd like to do is to segue into my talk on what should we do with our shoulds. So for starters, there's no escape from values. To try to have no values is itself a value. Inside our body is an architecture of regulation that is organized around certain values, including all the way down to the cellular and subcellular level. And then in the architecture of the nervous system and the brain, there are layers and layers and layers of healthy kind of set points for dynamic, changing systems. Those set points are values that promote survival in the passing on of genes that pass on genes, as well as related experiences that are in the service of all that, such as valuing peacefulness rather than, panic and terror, valuing contentment and satisfaction and gratitude rather than addiction and drivenness and frustration. You value kindness and connection with other people over hatefulness and viciousness and cruelty. There's a place for values, and certainly whether it's in clinical practice, which I've been doing one way or another for probably about 50 years, or in the spiritual traditions, and I'm familiar with quite a few, but particularly early Buddhism, kind of original Buddhism, the Buddha's own direct teaching, there are a lot of values in there. So I want to share with you, for example, some recent quotations from kind of the daily the daily word of Pariyati. I get a free daily quotation from them, and I also support them with little donations every year. But here's one of them. Great. It's about anger. And the relevance here is twofold. This teaching from the Samyutta Nikaya is itself saturated with shoulds, with aims, with standards, with ideals, with morality even. And it's also telling us something about being very careful with anger. The way I put it is use anger, but don't let it use you. So it says here, slay anger and you will be happy. That's a value statement. Slaying anger is a means to the desired end of happiness. Slay anger and you will not sorrow. For the slaying of anger in all its forms, with its poisoned root and sweet sting, that is the slaying the nobles praise. With anger slain, one weeps no more. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail about anger and the importance of what I think is a useful distinction between healthy anger and unhealthy anger. You decide what that distinction is for yourself. What I mean when I say it is that anger is a natural emotion. It has many useful functions for us. It also can have a fair amount of collateral damage for us and for other people. And we're not talking here, and I don't think the Buddha is talking about suppressing anger. I think we're talking here about, being careful with anger. So I want to drop in another quotation that's also an illustration of the emphasis on shoulds in the Buddhist tradition. As soon as we're talking about good or bad, right or wrong, skillful or unskillful, we're in the land of shoulds. The quotation here from the Dhammapada is, good is virtue until life's end. Good is faith that is steadfast. Good is the acquisition of wisdom. Good is the avoidance of evil. Evil, defined pragmatically in the Buddhist framework, is that which is harmful, particularly deliberately harmful, including to oneself. All right. So we have here, certainly in the Buddhist tradition, a lot of focus on shoulds, including in the Noble Eightfold Path with right, 8 things: right view, right or wise. The early translation is essentially right. Right intention. Intention is about shoulds. Right speech, right livelihood, right action, right mindfulness, right concentration, right effort. Right. In daily life. I have a lot of shoulds. One thing that I have a fair amount of should about is that if I'm driving on a twisting mountain road and I'm traveling at a reasonable speed and I come upon someone who's going really slowly and will not move over, I think they should move over. I think I should exercise. I think I should take my vitamins. I think I should be patient and manage my exasperation about certain things. We also have shoulds about other people. We think they should, like I said, get out of the way of the traffic. We think they should vote differently. We think they should vote at all. We think that they should stop using so much plastic. We think they should, give us 5-star reviews for our books or our programs. We have opinions, right? So what I want to explore with you is what I think of as wise and skillful and good ways that we should use as we approach our shoulds, and make a distinction between top-down approaches to shoulds and bottom-up. So we might pause for a moment as you find for yourself what is personally relevant here. Think about the ways that you criticize yourself for what you should or should not do or have done. Think about the place of regret, which has to do with, what you wish had not happened or wish had happened instead, regret, or further, guilt, remorse, and shame in your life. Right? And we're going to be exploring what I think are wise ways, including those offered in the Buddhist tradition, for relating to shoulds applied to yourself, both shoulds that on reflection seem to create a lot of suffering for you and may seem over the top, like the voices that are still yelling at you today, on the one hand. On the other hand, how can we be lived more by what we truly should do more or stop doing? Right? How can we do that? And then also, how can we apply this to other people, to our resentments, or about what they should be doing, or our despair, perhaps, for those we love, or for the leaders of our country, or fellow people in our country, for what we, for good reason, believe they should be doing but are not. How do we practice with all this? It's a huge topic, isn't it? Yes, in the absolute, as Rumi talks about and others as well, it's in the even the universe altogether as the universe, it's beyond right or wrong. It's beyond good or bad, beyond should or should not. Okay. And in everyday life, simply living as a body that has factors which promote its health and well-being and longevity and factors which do not. Right there, we're in the world of should. We evolved. Chimpanzees, our nearest living, relative from whom we separated in our, tree of evolution about 6 million years ago, chimpanzees are pretty sociopathic. They will cooperate a little bit with each other if it's in their self-interest. They're not very altruistic, generally speaking, other than primarily mothers and their young. Among the primate species, in almost all cases, fathers have nothing to do with their children and can even be fairly brutal if, the kid gets in the way. Not a lot of benevolence there, not a lot of morality there. And one of the primary features of the evolution of the human brain over the last 3 million years, in which it tripled in volume, is a lot of that build out, arguably a majority certainly of cortical build out, is driven by the evolutionary power of, broadly stated, love, caring, kindness, various social functions, including language, empathy, bonding, being able to imagine different possibilities and reflect on the past and experience shame. And the capacity to experience shame is certainly a factor in, as an engine of a lot of moral behavior in human beings. So we're designed to have a moral compass. Now, that moral compass can be really over the top. We can have, as Freud would describe, an overly developed superego that's yammering away and pounding away. It goes too far. But deep down, there's no replacement for a moral compass. I mean, we are very troubled by people whose level of moral reasoning is extremely primitive. It's at the chimpanzee level of what's in it for me and will I get caught? We're troubled by those kind of people for good reason. So There's no getting around this subject. So what I'd like to explore is some reflections on bringing wisdom to it. And for me, that has to do with two fundamental sources of how we approach what we should do. It could be the same should, and for ourselves or for another person. For example, we might think, oh, I should be not intoxicated. I should fulfill the precepts of not harming myself or other people. I should put in a good day's work of effort, a reasonable amount of effort. I should listen more deeply to other people. We might say that, or we might say that about other people. They should listen more deeply to me. They should treat me with more respect and kindness. They should stop yelling at me, or they should stop being so estranged in a cruel and punishing way and be willing to repair with me. Right? Legitimate shoulds. Legitimate shoulds. How do we approach them? We can approach our shoulds top down, drawing on executive regions, primarily behind the forehead, drawing on often pretty language-based standards, sometimes good standards. I offered 2 language-based standards for you in the chat from those quotations from the Buddha, about slaying anger and, being good, being virtuous until life's end, okay? Top down, there's a place for it where we are maybe reminding ourselves, maybe we are putting little yellow stickies in our, the wall next to our home office, as I do. Maybe we mutter to ourselves, as I have, and I think in ways that are okay. Don't be a fool here. That's a little muttering in the back of my mind that, yes, it's probably not the most skillful way to do it, but it works for me. Don't be a fool. There are passages in the surviving written record of the Buddha's teachings in which he addresses certain people as, oh, foolish one. Foolishness is a thing. Foolishness can sometimes be the case. Okay, so top down. There's a place for top down. It's often kind of where we start with our kids. We teach them rules. I think about sayings on the wall in first grade classrooms I've been in, pay attention, and share your toys. Okay, there's a place for top down. On the other hand, there's some real pitfalls in top down. And most of the problematic aspects of how we approach shoulds in our life come from too much top down. So you might think about yourself for starters and the ways in which top down criticizing of yourself, that voice that's muttering away, punishing yourself for falling short of certain standards. You might think about how that operates in your own life. Being angry at yourself for falling short or making a mistake. I've known people in clinical settings who hit themselves. They're so angry at themselves, or do other kinds of punishing behavior. I've known people who feel guilty about things and are punishing themselves as a result and refuse to move on from what they feel guilty about. Have you gone too far in terms of that kind of punishment? Top down has a quality of being contracted. You can feel it in your body. You get kind of tense when you're top down criticizing yourself or pushing yourself. Think about it also applied to other people, in which you get tense or contracted, righteous Top down is righteous, righteousness. Top down has a quality of propulsive, kinetic shaming. It's angry. Top down is rigid. You might think about key relationships in your life, as I have a lot recently, in which you just got carried away with your critiques and you lost sight of the whole person. You might, in other words, think about a running conflict with another person and the ways in which top-down shoulding is a factor in that conflict. Okay, so top-down. On the other hand, there are bottom-up approaches to motivation, to guiding yourself and guiding other people. Bottom-up involves a wide view. Top-down involves focused attention. We're zeroed in on that one thing we think should change. Bottom-up has an expansiveness to it. We're seeing the big picture. So, making this concrete, you might think about a person that you've been critical of, even if you love them dearly. To what extent have you gotten locked on to some particular behavior or lack of behavior in them or way of being that you've gotten kind of fixated to? That's top down. What would happen if you widened your view about them to take more and more into account? That's more bottom up. In a bottom-up approach to your values, your shoulds, your standards, your aims, your morality, your ethics, bottom-up sees many causes and conditions in the mix. So with another person who has done some things that you think they should not do, including being mean toward you or rejecting or mistreating you, bottom up, you certainly see all that. Bottom up is not evading valid shoulds, but in bottom up, you start to recognize, let's say with that other person, some of the many reasons why they've done what they've done. The many forces tugging and pulling in them, their biology, their temperament, their history of illness, their the way they were raised, the way their parents were raised, life events, their history with you, just the ways in which that kind of internal system has evolved over time in the ways that it has for them. All those factors, bottom up sees those. And notice what happens when you consider someone you're in a running conflict with, or have been critical with, or are frustrated with, all right? Maybe because the shoulds that you see are valid. Let's grant that. Let's suppose that. But how have you approached those shoulds with that other person? What happens when you approach them with a sense of spaciousness, bird's eye view, takes many things into account? It feels different, doesn't it? In bottom up, there is a sense and a presumption of your own innate goodness and the innate goodness in other people, even if it's not being expressed very much right now. So top down basically doesn't recognize innate goodness and is trying to influence, even force better behavior. On the other hand, you can feel your way into it here. Bottom up is increasingly grounded in the feeling of and the knowing of, which develops over time. The knowing of and the feeling of your own natural goodness. It's grounded there. And then what comes out of you comes from that natural goodness in an unforced and naturally flowing kind of way. So when you seek to motivate yourself toward your valid shoulds, toward your valid goals and values, what happens when you identify with a natural goodness in yourself, a natural healthiness, a natural virtue in yourself? What is the natural movement of that virtue, of that goodness? It probably naturally moves in a good direction that it should go in without you having to keep shoving it from behind. Feels really different, doesn't it? If you're interacting with another person, if you can recognize their goodness behind the bad behavior, things start to change. If you can recognize the ways that they've been trying to be good, they've been trying to produce or encourage that which is healthy and happy and wholesome and peaceful, even in problematic ways. If you have more of a sense of that in them, what happens? You soften. Your face softens. You give them more room to breathe. And because you are more in touch with the natural movements in them toward what is good, in other words, the shoulds, when you are more in touch with that natural movement in them toward the good, they can become more in touch with it themselves. One way to understand or relate to bottom-up approaches to should is in the language of what's called karma yoga. I think Roger Walsh talked about that when he was guest teaching maybe a couple of weeks ago. And this is basically the idea that we do what we do in a spirit of service. So from the bottom up, we are making our offering. So maybe you should, for the sake of the other person, have an important conversation with someone that they may not welcome, even though you think that it would be valuable for them. And so you should do it, you think, legitimately. How do you enter that conversation? On the one hand, do you enter it top down, trying to force a result, trying to make something happen inside the black box of their mind? Or do you come into it open-handed and open-hearted, truly out of service for them, with sincerity and authenticity as you offer what you feel and what you see, entirely based on an agenda of contribution to them? Now, sometimes we need to be in conversations bottom up in which we are sticking up for ourselves. And this is a very important and kind of tricky point. In bottom up approaches to our values and our aims, I think that one aspect of bottom up approaches, and I'm going to use some potentially loaded language, is to find that fighter inside you, the good fighter inside you, by which I mean you're fighting for yourself. Change the word fight if you don't like it. You are struggling for yourself. You are asserting for yourself. You are efforting for yourself. There's a commitment. You matter to you. Because you matter to you, you're willing to make strong efforts on your own behalf. Top-down motivation is tiring. We get worn out. Bottom-up motivation, Kristen Neff talks about fierce self-compassion, fierce compassion, including for others, in which you make an offering to them, with a lot of clarity and dignity. But when you do it from the bottom up, it feels really different. It doesn't feel like you're pounding on other people. It's more like you're simply being lived by what is innately good in you as it is expressed with that other person. And so I invite you to consider these ways of being with other people in challenging conversations. Bottom up always has compassion. Top down, it's usually an afterthought. Not much compassion for yourself, not much compassion for other people. When you're pressuring yourself, that's an aspect of top down, pressuring. Bottom up is inviting what is good within to become manifest. Top down, like I said, is trying to pressure or force something. It feels very, very different. Not much compassion in that. So to finish here, and then I'll take a look at the chats and some of the comments and questions that have come through. There's a phrase that people use that for me is always kind of tricky, but I'm going to use it here, which is the notion that they're doing the best they can. Or you could apply it to yourself. I was doing the best I could. It's complex. For example, how do we include a legitimate moral view if people are doing the best they can, including ourselves? On the other hand, if you, like me, has been primarily, oriented to shoulds, top down, as I'm learning more and more about how to orient to them bottom up, it can be a beautiful corrective, a beautiful balance to look at yourself and go, I made some bad choices. I can recognize the difference between this and that. This was better, and I didn't do that. I took the low road rather than the high road. I feel bad about that. And so many forces and factors were in the mix. And in some kind of sense, I did the best I could because that's what I did at the time. If that works for you, in opening a space for self-forgiveness that also includes clarity about your own conduct and a bottom-up movement to take the higher road from now on, great. It's been helpful for me because I can be pretty hard on myself as a good balance to go, Rick, so much was going on. It was crazy. You're going to do better next time. And to apply this way of thinking to other people, particularly, again, if you tend toward being, as I do, kind of, high-performing, picky, righteous, critical. I'm a recovering critic. It can be helpful to look at other people that you maybe resent or just are disappointed in, including sometimes other people in your country, and go, well, maybe they'll do better next time. To finish here, I think one thing that is really helpful is to track the tipping point from top down to bottom up. Often when we're engaging with some of our values and goals, and for other people or for herself, we start top down. It's understandable. We have a rule or a standard. For example, in Buddhism, the 5 precepts are very top down in their initial expression. You undertake the training precept to avoid killing living beings, taking what's not freely offered, speaking falsely, harming yourself or others through sexuality, and being intoxicated. That starts top down. Okay. But then over time, there can be kind of a tipping. If you're 99 top down and 1% bottom up, you can start moving in the direction of increasingly being motivated by and lived by bottom up ways of orienting to your values, your goals, your dreams and ideals, and ways of orienting to those as they apply to other people. A tipping. So you could track that tipping in yourself, tracking the difference between top down and bottom up. They feel very different. And seeing if you, when you start top down and you notice you are, take a breath and then ask yourself, okay, what would happen here if I took a wider view, if I was less pressured, less caught up in my righteous case against other people or about another person or myself? What would happen? And what feels like a natural movement of the innate goodness in me that's relevant here? And can I give over to that? All right, let me take a look. So many great comments that have come in. I'm not going to be able to, address all of them. Beautiful comments. I saw Fran's comment. Hi, Fran, at 52 minutes after the hour, in which the other thing here too, and Fran's really right. Even though, ironically, bottom up is the core of our own authenticity, because it's really at the center of our being, we can also initially kind of pretend to be bottom up as a way of gradually living our way into it. I think that's a really astute and beautiful, useful comment. I've never heard anyone say that before, Fran. That's really cool. Okay, so let's see here. Now, again, I don't want to get into a lot of details about the kind of traditional language in those two passages from the Buddha Dharma. I kind of pulled them out as examples of a certain thread, especially in early Buddhism, that can be very moralistic. I'm not so sure that that's what the Buddha himself said. Often the second and third generation interpreters of a great teacher, I'm thinking of Jesus as a pretty clear example of that, can take a very bottom-up kind of profundity from the root teacher and start turning it into rules and prescriptions and commandments and admonitions. What do you make of this? Are you tracking the difference between top-down and bottom-up? And maybe I'll just share something quite personal here. I won't get too much into the individual details. Ironically, well, for me, there's been a lot of light bulbs about this topic in the last few days. And I've been hard on myself today. I mean, for some time now. I've been hard on myself for some time now about how I was hard on someone in my life many years ago. And as you get older, I think a natural process of life review and reflection that psychologists talk about is just really normal. So the irony here is that as I've been approaching things more from bottom up, a bottom up approach to my own conduct and reflecting about my own conduct has opened me up to more of a bottom up approach to reflecting on the conduct of that other person that I was hard on years ago. I don't know if I'm saying it very well. Lightening up or loosening up about being hard on them, but on being hard on myself helps me appreciate how I should have operated differently. With that person, I brought a lot of top-down criticism to a long time ago. Bottom up does not mean we should just give other people a pass, a free pass. Bottom up does not mean that we should not take the action that we can. I think, profound, revelatory, radical teaching of the Buddha is about both and. We can both have wholesome desires for justice and for feeding children and protecting the vulnerable and protecting our fragile planet. We can have wholesome desires, including wholesome desires for our own awakening. And also, we can approach those desires held lightly on the basis of an underlying, growing, resilient well being on the inside. Both and, right? We can both have a moral view about what we should do, while also recognizing the vastness and complexity and interdependence of everything in reality. Both and, both and. And what I observe is that people who are very far along in practice and who are clearly living primarily from the bottom up on the basis of their own innate goodness, they are not slackers. They are very engaged. They are very helpful and contributing in all kinds of communities. So both and. So as we finish here, I really invite you to explore what is it like to identify worthy shoulds, worthy values, goals, standards, dreams, visions, aims. What is it like to know what they are and to approach them from the bottom up increasingly with less and less top-down pressure and contraction and rigidity and narrowness and anger. That's what this exploration is about.